Excellencies, distinguished speakers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the 9th KAS-CSIS Germany-Indonesia Strategic Dialogue, Trade and Competitiveness in a Changing Global Landscape, Building a Stronger Economic Partnership between Europe and Indonesia. My name is Nadia Daulay and I will be serving as your Master of Ceremony for today. Please allow me to briefly walk you through our agenda for today. Today's program will run for a full day until the late afternoon, beginning with opening and special remarks, followed by 2 panels in the afternoon, cut by lunch, and then resuming with 2 other panels and closing remarks at the end. Without further ado, let us begin with the welcoming remarks. First, I would like to invite Dr. Yose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director, Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS Indonesia. Please, Pak Yose.
His Excellency Ralf, Beste, Ambassador Designate of the Federal Republic of Germany to the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Christoph Brandt, the board member and treasurer Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, Pak Denis, Director for Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, Mr. Antoine Ripoll, Minister Counselor for Parliamentary Relations, EU Delegation to ASEAN, Pak Yusuf Wanandi, of course, our founder, CSIS founder and board member of the Board of Trustees, co-chair of the Board of Trustees, CSIS Foundations, distinguished guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to you all and welcome to CSIS. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 9th KAS-CSIS Germany-Indonesia Strategic Dialogue. As you can see, we have done it for 9 times, 8 years in a row already, and we never really skip the year for this strategic dialogue between Germany and Indonesia. Thanks for sure to the support of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung. So on behalf of CSIS, I would like to extend our sincere appreciation to Dr. Christoph Brandt and also to Pak Denis for the continued partnership and trust between our institutions to co-host this important dialogue. This year's theme, the trade and competitiveness in a changing global landscape, comes at a truly critical time. With Indonesia-EU Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreements now concluded, both sides have an opportunity to move toward a new chapter in economic relations. The CEPA basically represents more than just a trade deal. It is a platform for long-term cooperation, a symbol of confidence between Indonesia and Europe that can thrive through openness and also not isolation. But around the world, we are witnessing increasing uncertainty. The resurgence of protectionism and economic nationalism has disrupted global supply chain and testing the resilience of multilateral systems. At the recent ASEAN and APEC summit last week, for example, we saw some development. Most notably is the agreement between the United States and several ASEAN countries. While many actually anticipated that outcomes, and we already expect that kind of move, still those new deals raise serious questions about their implications to Southeast Asia. And also the implications to the cohesiveness and centrality of ASEAN and the strategic positioning of Indonesia. So in this environment, frameworks that are based on openness, integrations, and based on multilateral rules are more important than ever. Agreements like Indonesia-EU CEPA or perhaps you can also see it in this region such as RCEP as well as CPTPP remind us that the value of trust, predictability, and shared commitment to rules-based trade have become the strategic platforms, strategic foundations for cooperations in the future, instead of agreements that are shaped by the logic of might is right. So for Indonesia and Europe, this is both challenge and opportunity. We must look beyond traditional trade and explore new collaborations from infrastructure, green energy to digital transformation. Europe as well as Germany for sure can be essential partner in Indonesia's effort to strengthen the competitiveness and achieve sustainable industrial growth. At the same time, Indonesia can serve as a gateway for European countries, especially for Germany, to engage more deeply with Southeast Asia and other countries in the region. So to realize these visions, we must continue to talk, to engage openly, strategically, but also perhaps pragmatically about what works, what doesn't, and how we can adapt together to this rapidly changing global landscape. I would like to to thank all distinguished speakers and participants for joining us today. I hope the discussions will provide us with a new understanding, better understandings with the current situations, and also provide some recommendations to our governments here in Indonesia and also in Germany or other European countries in order to face and to deal with the current global situations more appropriately. Thank you very much, and I wish everyone productive and engaging day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Yose. Please, a round of applause. Next, we will move on to our next speaker, Dr. Christoph Brandt, Board Member and Treasurer of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung. Dr. Christoph, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you this morning at this important dialogue forum that we are having here today together between CSIS and the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. Let me first start by greeting some of the key players of this dialogue today. First of all, the founder of CSIS, Yusuf Vanandi, who is today with us. We welcome you very much, and I know that you've been at the heart of this dialogue for many years, so thank you for being here and showing your interest in this dialogue. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge Ms. Diaroro Estividia Putri, the Vice Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, and of course, His Excellency Ralf Beste, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome to you, and we are most grateful that you take the time to be with us this morning. And of course, my predecessor here at the podium, Dr. Jose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director of the CSIS, a long-term friend who has been for many years a driving force of this dialogue forum. And my colleague, Dr. Denis Suasana, Director of our Adenauer-Stiftung Indonesia and Timor-Leste offices here in Indonesia. Welcome also to you. You are also a key force in this dialogue between Germany and Indonesia, and we very much appreciate your work. And lastly, Mr. Antoine Ripoll, Minister, Counselor, Parliamentary Relations of the EU delegation here to Asia, to ASEAN. So many important people are coming to this event, and of course, the topic couldn't be more relevant in these days. Changing global landscape. I think we all sense that the landscape that we are faced with has changed dramatically over the past years. Many things that we have believed are true are probably changing. The fundamental of the way that we do trade across the globe are changing. And of course, for all of us, it's important to find partners and destiny in what we are doing. So Germany and Indonesia can be important partners in this, and therefore this dialogue forum that we today do for the 9th time is a critical part of the dialogue between our two countries, and we are most grateful that CSIS and us can actually do this together for so many years now. The Asia-Pacific region has increasingly become the focal point of geopolitical developments, and only last week we've seen high-level summits in Kuala Lumpur and in Seoul, and of course we also saw many leaders from President Trump, President Xi Jinping, and President Lula to show up at the same place at once. And it just tells us how important things are if all these dignitaries come together to discuss the affairs of the region. And to say that in a more precise way, Asia-Pacific is not just an important region, it is right now economically the most vibrant and dynamic region of the world. Germany and the European Union have a strong interest in deepening economic partnership with Asia, and Indonesia as a member of the G20 and most recently BRICS and the biggest economy in Southeast Asia is of course a key partner for Germany and Europe. And the signing of the EU-Indonesia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, CEPA, in September was of course an important step forward. I'm sure that this is only the starting point of a close and successful economic cooperation between the European Union and Indonesia going forward. Today, during this strategic dialogue, we are going to discuss how such economic cooperation between the EU and Indonesia could be successfully developed further. And of course, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung has been active in facilitating the dialogue between Europe and Asia for many decades. KAS office in Jakarta was established in 1968, so some time ago, when, of course, the current development weren't foreseeable at all. So we are actually, continuing in an important phase of the development, both here in the region, but also, of course, in Europe, with the recent devastating news that we have from the Ukraine over the last 2.5 years. So we very much look forward to actually see how our partnerships in the world, and in particular also here in Southeast Asia, can bring more cooperation upon us. Now, maybe I should close by saying Konrad Adenauer, as you know, was the first chancellor of Germany after the Second World War. And when he would look at the word competitiveness from his time, when he started to actually run Germany, is a completely different thing than what we talk about today. Today we have much more developed economies, industries, worldwide competition that we are actually participating in. Nobody would have thought that when he took office in 1949. And sometimes I think short quotes of politicians are sometimes the best quotes. And of course at the Adenauer Foundation we have many quotes from Konrad Adenauer, as you can imagine. But I think one of his most memorable one was when he said, the most important thing is courage. So let's think about how can we use courage to move forward, can we use courage to cooperate, how can we continue in an open dialogue that actually is to the benefit of both sides. And maybe that's the spirit with which we should have this dialogue and continue this dialogue. And I thank you all for being here. And with that, I think I hand it over to the ambassador. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christoph Brandt. And next, I would like to invite Ambassador Ralf Beste, Ambassador Designate of the Federal Republic of Germany to the Republic of Indonesia. Please, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Distinguished representatives of the Indonesian government, colleagues Dr. Damuri and Dr. Brandt. First of all, of course, let me thank CSIS and the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation for having organized this event. Maybe to add a little bit on the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, it's the biggest political foundation in Germany, so it's has a special relevance in German matters, and it's also the foundation with the closest ties to the incumbent Chancellor's party, which is a strong signal for the keen interest that Berlin is developing and strongly developing with regard to Indonesia. Being the third speaker, it's always a bit difficult to say things that haven't been said before, but I usually refer to Karl Valentin, a famous German comedian. He used to say, all has been said, but not by everyone. So I'm the one who's gonna fill you in on that. Maybe what I bring to the table is being fresh to this country, only having been on this post for 3 weeks now. I'm energized by the steady flow of visitors from Germany. Last week, we had a federal vice minister for development in Jakarta, followed by a delegation from the German Bundestag. Just yesterday, a whole new Airbus A400M hailed from Seville, with Germans in the crew, German parts and German engineering in it, as the first of hopefully a future proud fleet of military transport aircraft made in Europe and in Germany. Your President Prabowo received it personally, and there is no better way to illustrate how dear the economic and security cooperation between our two countries is to all of us, which makes today's conference all the more significant. Indonesia is not only the largest market in Southeast Asia, but also an emerging economic power with tremendous potential. You know the facts: stable growth rates since almost 2 decades, an impressive richness in resources, a big consumer market with huge opportunities for trade and industries, integration into global supply chains. Germany, on the other hand, is the EU's largest economy and the 3rd biggest in the world. It has a long history of cooperation and exchange with Indonesia based on mutual respect and shared economic interests. However, I'm convinced there is even more potential to expand trade and investment that remains to be tapped. And we need that. The new German government wants to ensure our country's security, liberty and prosperity, and it is under no illusion that in our rapidly changing world that the former speakers have elucidated, in our rapidly changing world, we need to work harder than ever to achieve this triple goal of prosperity, liberty, and security. The timing of this dialogue could not be better because of CEPA. My 4 predecessors as ambassador have been reporting back to Berlin on the negotiations of CEPA. I strive to be the one who not only reports on the progress, but volunteer to put my shoulder to the wheel so that we get things moving. With the conclusion of negotiations of CEPA, our work on CEPA has only started. CEPA provides a framework that needs bold, speedy, and continuous implementation. That is true for tariff elimination, but also regarding improvements of investment climates and market access on both sides. Very welcome. Good morning. We want to significantly increase trade volumes, and we focus on Indonesia as a destination and an even more compelling case for large German investments. I stand ready to collaborate with the Indonesian government and the business community in order to identify mutually beneficial trade and investment opportunities. For a successful implementation of CEPA, I believe that we also need to have honest discussions on remaining challenges in the integration of European and Indonesian supply chains. While CEPA will provide a platform to address regulatory bottlenecks and uncertainties, it is on all of us to leverage this framework to tackle the challenges. There is a panel in this afternoon with the punchline gateway or bottleneck. Well, that depends on us. Let's talk, but let's also do. Let me underline that I personally and my team at the German Embassy stand ready to follow up with you. After all, strong economies and deepened economic ties between Indonesia and Europe are securing our country's freedom, security and prosperity. Thank you. Vielen Dank. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. This concludes our opening remarks. Now we'll move on to the keynote speeches, titled From Tariff Wars to Strategic Cooperation, Shaping the Future of EU-Indonesia Economic Relations. First, I would like to call onto the stage Mr. Antoine Ripoll, Minister Counselor, Parliamentary Affairs of the EU Delegation to ASEAN. Please.
Selamat pagi, nama saya Antoine Ripoll, saya dari Prancis dan Uni Eropa dan Prancis. I work here at the EU delegation to ASEAN. It will be almost 2 years, so it means my Bahasa Indonesia should be much better already. But my excuse is that I'm traveling quite often in the region because I'm in charge of developing a network for the European Parliament in the region. So I will apologize for not being as fluent as I should in your beautiful language. I would like to thank very much the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and the CSIS. I'm very honored to see the founder here, the board member of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung. I've worked quite a lot with Mr. Pöttering, former president of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung when he was president of the European Parliament. So it's a pleasure, always a pleasure. And thank you to Denis for his invitation, and the executive director of CSIS. So today I would like, and of course I would like to say I'm so happy to be in presence of, I'm humbled to be in presence of the Minister for Trade, whom I met last year, and so it's a pleasure really to see you again here. Today I would like to briefly say things first on the CEPA. After 10 years of negotiation, I think it deserves some more deep remarks. And I would like to also say a few words about where we are at the moment in the European political scene. It's a tricky moment for Europe. It's a very interesting moment, but also a very tricky moment. And I would like to explain a bit how it's going and what we can expect, as much as I can tell, in the next month and years in terms and what it means for the relationship between Europe and Indonesia and the region. So I would first say about CEPA that CEPA is a game changer, or has the potential to be a game changer in the EU-Indonesia relations, well beyond trade. First, CEPA contributes to aligning Indonesia and Europe on a more common vision of geopolitics and geoeconomics. Second, CEPA helps us diversify our economy and our trade relations and supply chain for both of us. CEPA is also a game changer because it reinforces economic security and predictability in our relationship. And finally, it reinforces our complementarity. It happens that Indonesia and the EU have compatible trade patterns. Indonesian exports are not about goods produced in the EU mostly, and vice versa. Important Indonesian export products gaining preferential access through CEPA include palm oil and palm oil derivatives, including biodiesel, textiles and apparel, footwear, processed foods, fisheries and seafood products, and agricultural products like coffee and others. On the other hand, the key exports from the EU to the region, to Indonesia, include automobiles and motor vehicles, dairy products, meat products, processed foods such as chocolates and bakery items, very important, especially chocolate, machinery and electrical equipment, pharmaceuticals and chemicals. So as you see, we are very complementary, and that's a good thing. A forceful signal in support of rules-based international trade is also what CEPA is about. I think at the moment when the international rules-based order is let's say, endangered or is at risk, or let's say did not have the good days that it had relatively a few years ago, I think it's a very important signal that Indonesia and the EU are giving through CEPA to give credit to the multilateral order and the international trade. So in total, the CEPA is a logical and overdue step in terms of both trade and investment and geopolitics. CEPA supports the agriculture sector, I said it, the key industrial sectors, the green transition, the digital transition, and also an agenda for the future. So as you know, when many countries in the world negotiate trade agreements, they usually are happy enough negotiating on trade barriers, tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. And in the case of the EU, we actually are more ambitious with our partners. It creates more difficulties, and that's also why the reason why we had such a lengthy negotiation. But our trade agreements are much more than trade. They really are about also governance, human rights, climate change. So it's a much more ambitious agenda. It makes it more difficult, but also it makes it more far-ranging when we finally conclude our negotiation. Not everything was solved in our negotiation. We still have margin for progress. In areas where decisive progress was not possible at this stage, key principles are, however, established in the agreement, creating a pathway to progressively complementing them. CEPA is a living agreement, and the examples of things that have still to be negotiated and agreed upon are government procurement, which is not a little thing, it's a big thing, Minister, as you know, and state-owned enterprise subsidy. So we still have work to do together, but I believe that we build the trust necessary to overcome these issues. So what is CEPA? CEPA is a huge opportunity to create and foster sustainable trade and investment. CEPA creates a more transparent, predictable, and cost-effective environment, enhance market access and reduce cost. CEPA creates the conditions for jobs and innovation by eliminating customs duties, lowering trade costs, opening services and investment opportunities, and protecting intellectual property. So all this is already quite a lot. What CEPA is not is a magic wand, but it's rather a door that has been opened. And we believe and we hope that through this door, many other agreements will happen. You will also have noticed that during the same time frame as the CEPA agreement, we had, through the visit of President Prabowo Subianto in Brussels in the summer, we had an agreement on the visa cascade. And I think this is another signal that we are giving to our friends in Indonesia that we mean business with them. Beyond CEPA, I would like to say a few words, as promised, about the current situation in Europe. So I would like to say that, you know, very often in Indonesia or in other places in the world, Europe is seen sometimes as over-regulating and, you know, overprotective. But I would say this is very much driven by the DNA of Europeans. It's really driven by democratic demand. If you ask, and I was checking again the latest polls in the last years and the last month, if you check what Europeans want, they really want more protection. They want more protection climate change. They want to make sure that we all see that our planet is suffering and is going through a lot of destruction. And so we believe in Europe that we must do our part to do something about it. And of course, if Europe does it on its own, it doesn't serve any purpose. So we really need to encourage our friends all over the world to do it. And it's very difficult because politicians usually like to kick the can saying we will do it tomorrow. But we all see that we can't wait only for tomorrow on this topic. Another topic that is critical for our people in Europe and that drives the political agenda is the digital and the AI perspective. And really, there's a clear sense in Europe that we just cannot leave digital field and AI to just the companies, innovators. We need innovation. We need competitiveness. At the same time, we also need to protect the people. So we need to find the right balance between the two. And I know that there is a lot of dialogue at parliamentary level, at executive level, especially on AI, when Indonesia and other countries are now thinking and working on the AI legislation. So we have to work on that. So we are really driven by the European Parliament and the national parliaments and our governments. Really, they are doing what our people want. And what our people want is not just jobs and growth. Of course, they do want that. And when I look at the difference between our growth in the last 10 years, it's been around between 1 and 1.5. When you're in the region, your growth has been 5%. We are lagging. So that's why you are now seeing in Europe in the last month, and I believe you will see that in the next 5 years or more. We need to rebalance probably our our priorities of being protective, supporting the environment, supporting the consumers, making sure there is the right balance between innovation and competitiveness. So we're going to rebalance that. My time is out, so I would like just to say that with Europe, what you see is what you get. So we are not going to change so much. Certain countries we have seen has changed dramatically their policies. With Europe, the chance that this is going to happen is very limited. It can be boring sometimes, but I think it was a great advantage in this moment of unpredictability and volatility that you have with Europe, with the EU, a very strong partner. You know where we are going, and you saw with SHEPA that we mean business. We want to do better with you. We believe that our level of trade, and I finished, our level of trade with Indonesia is not at all where it should be when you look at where we are with Vietnam, where we are with other countries in the region. Indonesia should be much higher. Indonesia-EU relations, trade relations, and economic relations, political relations should be at a much higher stage than where we are. So I believe there is margin for progress, but also that SHEPA is bringing a lot of trust between us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Round of applause for Mr. Antoine Ripoll. Thank you very much. Before I would like to invite the next speaker onto the stage, we have received news that Mr. Airlangga Hartarto, the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, will arrive later around 11 to deliver his remarks. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Ms. Diah Roro Esti Widyaputri, Vice Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, to deliver her keynote speech. Please.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace and blessings be upon you all. The Honorable Ambassador Ralf Beste, the Ambassador Designate of the Federal Republic of Germany of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Antoine Ripoll, the Minister Council of Parliamentary Affairs of the EU Delegation to ASEAN, Dr. Christoph Brandt, the board member and treasurer of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, KAS. Just a quick note. Just a few days ago, I met with two wonderful parliamentarians from Germany, and Nicholas and Katarina, and they specifically told me to make sure I made the time to come here. So this is also one of the reasons why I am here, and thank you again. We met before as well for the kind invitation. Dr. Yose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director of CIS Indonesia, it's not the first time we met, and we'll be more than happy to constantly collaborate in the many factors that we could with the Ministry of Trade. Bapak Yusuf Wanandi, co-founder of CSIS Indonesia, Bapak Iman Pambagyo, former chief negotiator of the Indonesia-EU SIPA, Dr. Rifan Ardianto, this is my colleague from the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, who is also here, the head of the Center of International Trade Policy, and all distinguished speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen. So firstly, I'd like to convey my regards and thank you to CSIS for the very kind invitation, particularly this morning in addressing the issue of trade and competitiveness in a changing global landscape, in which we hope that we are able to build a stronger economic partnership between Europe and Indonesia. And I do hope that this serves as an important avenue for us to not only get together, but also discuss, to brainstorm, and to see how we can further collaborate going forward. I think all in all, there's a lot of momentum for trade, right? Yes, we know that there is a growing protectionism that is currently taking place in many different countries. We know that there are big economies that are not agreeing with one another in some aspects, shape, or form. We understand that there are so many different dynamics that are currently taking place. But at the same time, Indonesia seeks to look at the situation in a more positive light. We see that there is still potential for us to continue the positioning of our foreign policy, in which we are always positioning ourselves in a way that we allow ourselves to continuously engage with the world, with the many regions that are out there, and for us to build dialogue, for us to collaborate, for us to seek solutions. And this year serves as a very important momentum, given that we have recently just substantially concluded the Indonesia-EU Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. And this lays as a foundation to further our trade, to further our economic cooperation, and is proof that yes, after 9 to 10 years of negotiations, there are concrete solutions at play. And we hope that this can serve, again, not only as a momentum, but as a path for us to continuously work together amidst the current geopolitical situation. And it's a very interesting and important time also for Indonesia, because if I may share in this to this audience today, that we have also ratified some other CEPAs, including that of the one with Peru. So really just opening our doors even widely to the Latin American countries, but also to other regions such as Canada. Again, this has gone through a substantive process in terms of the negotiation, but we're grateful that we're able to reach these conclusions, right? And so this is something that is important to recognize and to understand that this is the positioning that Indonesia has currently. If we look at particularly the trade partnership between Indonesia and the EU, we know that in 2024, the total trade between Indonesia and EU has reached $30.4 billion US dollars, with a trend rate of a 4.5% increase compared to the previous year. And beyond trade, the EU recorded as the 7th largest source of FDI for Indonesia. I think this is really important to recognize, with a total investment of 1.1 billion US dollars. When we look at really just the portfolio for trade, we heard earlier as well by my colleague who mentioned about the imports and the exports. The main exports commodities in which we export to the EU include CPO, copper, footwear, fatty acid. But we're also trying to make sure that the small, medium enterprises are tapping into the European market. We recently had a trade mission to the Netherlands. And this is also one of the ways in which the Ministry of Trade is seeking to find partnerships with the European region. I recently also led a trade mission to Germany specifically, and we talked about the trade and services. So there's a lot of potential also for services sector, because we know that in Germany they have an aging population, and on the contrast in Indonesia, we have a young, thriving population. A majority of our population are productive, around 68%. And so we thought that there were avenues for that kind of collaboration, whether it be in the hospitality sector, whether it be in the nursing or hospitals in Germany. But we also know that language is also a criteria in which needs to be fulfilled. So there were a lot of discussions as to how we can make sure that these standards are being met by the Indonesian human capital for them to then penetrate to Germany, countries like Germany and elsewhere. So these are some of the things that we're currently working on. Outside of that, we recognize that the Indonesia EU is a milestone in itself. It's a milestone achievement. It's not only a trade deal, but it's also a strategic partnership grounded in shared values. So we're talking about cooperation. We're talking about sustainability as well as inclusive growth. And most importantly, the Indonesia-EU CEPA established the rulebook that we urgently need to establish the certainty of doing business for both sides and ensure there will be no unfair trade that is caused by rising protectionism. If any, the CEPA provides the toolbox, whereas any parties may and will have opportunities to address it in the most amicable manner. In a sense, unilateral protectionism maneuver will be in check at all times. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, a trade agreement can do to address protectionism, which in turn will allow trade and competitiveness to continuously thrive as well. Ladies and gentlemen, just 3 extra points that I'd like to share with you today. So We want to make sure that the Indonesia-EU SIPA delivers its full potential. And therefore, one of them being, firstly, we need to align and strengthen cooperation in priority sectors. Indonesia and the EU and its strategic members need to focus on strategic sectors of mutual interest. I mentioned a couple just now. So, for example, renewable energy is a large field that perhaps we can collaborate further. Sustainable agriculture. The digital economy is a growing one as well, and we see that there is a lot of potential for collaboration here. And green manufacturing. I foresee that both sides need to consider to work towards a shared standards and regulatory alignment, and by doing so, businesses may operate easily back and forth. Why is this the case? Why is this the case? Because I strongly believe that a regulatory harmonization can be turned into a competitive advantage that will attract quality investment, innovation, and complement economic activities in both sides. Secondly, the urgency of empowering SMEs through capacity building and market access is paramount. We know that the SMEs really just right now in Indonesia serves as the backbone of our economy. Around 60% of our GDP are run by SMEs. And 64% of the SMEs are run by women. This is also a very interesting fact. And so one of the things that we are currently trying to work on in the Ministry of Trade itself is to ensure that SMEs are not only empowered, but they're also secured the potential markets that are out there. So how our SMEs can go global. We call this UMKM bisa ekspor. So SMEs being able to penetrate to the international market. And there are a lot of goods and services which may be of interest to the European market. And this is something that we'd love to kind of push forward in the future. And thirdly, lastly, the increase of public-private partnerships in numerous areas. A strong collaboration between governments, businesses, and academia must be pursued in a collective manner. It can be simply in terms of trade investment promotion, encouraging various sustainable economic initiatives, incentivizing green investment in every aspect of industry, making circular economy initiatives into a habit and thus day-to-day business. We are currently in the works of collaborating even more intensely with KADIN, or the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce. We see this as a very important avenue because when we speak about, yes, the trade agreements have been concluded, but the other homework is really just all about the utilization of the trade agreements, right? And so there needs to be more effective partnership and commitment, particularly within the business sectors. So ensuring that the private sector are also on board and that they are making full advantage of the trade agreements that are already currently in play. And so I believe that these three approaches will lay a strong foundation for trade to prosper going forward. And my very last point is to address the very issue of climate change that was recently just discussed. I mean, if I may just ask the audience here, have you seen the change in weather patterns recently? You know, and also if you fly frequently, perhaps you notice that turbulences are occurring a lot more frequently than they used to. And we see the impacts, direct impacts of sea level rises and so forth. So I think we have to come together to have a consensus that, look, this is what is happening right now. And we understand that there are many policies that are in play or will be effectively in play, for example, within the European region. We have the EUDR, we have CBAM, and so forth, which are really great mechanisms, right, to address these pressing issues of climate change. Now, the problem, the way that I see it, is that there's a lot of gap between countries that are able to mitigate climate change effectively and are already quite expert in this field, and there are countries that are still, the status being still developing, and they're still trying to learn how they can mitigate climate change in the best possible way. Indonesia has signed the Paris Agreement, so we have that commitment of decreasing greenhouse gas emissions by 32%. And there are many advances that are currently taking place, including that of green energy transition. We have a rise of electric car usages, right? There's a lot of infrastructure that is currently in play. But at the same time, there needs to be assistance for us to better mitigate in the best possible way. So the challenge is, the next challenge is, yes, there is this climate problem. At the same time, we're also trying to make sure that economic growth is continuously progressing. We want to continue to do business and we want to continuously trade. But at the same time, how can we do so in a manner that is good for the environment? So there needs to be assistance given to countries like Indonesia for us to be able to do so. And at the same time, how can climate change mitigation not hinder trade to progress? That's also another challenge. And we have to make sure that we address all. Because when we speak about economic development, when we speak about sustainable growth and development, we're talking about the economic growth being there, but also social welfare, we're taking care of our human capital, and lastly, how we are taking good care of the environment. So these three things, three pillars, need to be addressed going forward. That is all. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that today serves as a very important avenue and a productive one for everybody here present today. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Vice Minister. Please stay on the stage so that we can take a group photo. I would also like to invite some of our key role players here, Mr. Yusuf Wanandi. Please join us on the stage. His Excellency Ralf Beste, Dr. Yose Rizal Damuri, Dr. Christoph Brandt, Dr. Denis and also Mr. Antoine Ripoll. Please join us on the stage for a group photo. May one please move to the left? Sorry, to your right. Okay, everyone, on the count. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on the stage. You may also please exit the stage so that we can move on to the next session. All right, while our stagehands prepare our stage for the next panel session, I would like to give a short introduction. This panel session is titled Toward the New Global Economic Arrangement, the Role of Multilateral and Regional Arrangements. As we know, the global trading system is undergoing profound change as tariff wars, rising protectionism, and the securitization of trade reshape the rules of engagement. Traditional multilateral frameworks face mounting pressure, while regional and bilateral agreements are increasingly filling the gaps. This session will examine how current shifts are redefining the global economic order and what role multilateral institutions as well as regional arrangements can play in sustaining open rules-based trade. The discussion will highlight implications for the future of global trade governance and how Indonesia, Europe, and ASEAN can navigate these transformations to advance more resilient and inclusive economic cooperation. I would also like to introduce the speakers for this panel, but please come on the stage after I finish introducing you. We have Mr. Iman Pambagyo, the Director General of International Trade Negotiations, Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, and Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to World Trade Organization in his respective years. Dr. Rifan Arianto, Head of the Center for International Trade Policy, Ministry of the Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. Dr. Christian E. Rieck, KAS Visiting Fellow, United States Study Center, University of Sydney, Associate Professor of War Studies, University of Potsdam, and our moderator today, Dr. Shafiah F. Muhibat, Deputy Executive Director for Research here at CSIS Indonesia. Please, you may all join us for the stage for the first panel.
Very good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. It's a pleasure for me to moderate the session. My name is Safia Muhibat. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of CSIS. I think following up the opening sessions and also the keynote speeches, I think it's very timely that we begin the first discussion on some of the, some very important issues with regards to the overall theme of our discussion today, which is, trade and competitiveness in a changing global landscape. So from the opening session and also the keynote speeches, we've talked a lot about how important it is, the relationship between both Indonesia and Germany, and also on a more broader perspective between Southeast Asia and Europe. And we talked about, we list all of the things that why this is important. And I think we have come to an agreement that it is very important and very timely for us to increase or even make these relationships even closer and more beneficial for all of the stakeholders in this regard. But I think now in this session, we would like to remind ourselves that all of this that we're discussing, all of this importance, all of the significance of improving relations are occurring at the back of the realities that there are now, the global trading system is undergoing profound changes. We talked about tariff wars, we talked about the rising of protectionism, and there is also the securitization of trade reshaping the rules of engagement. So the big question, I think, is how do we move ahead, looking at these current challenges? Yes, we agree that it is important to improve relations, but then how do we do it at the back of this occurring challenges? And I think that we're not seeing the end of it yet. We talked about the rise of protectionism. It doesn't seem to be stopping. It's actually in some countries is even more worse than it already was. So I think it's time that we talked about how do we move forward this? How do we adjust our policies, our engagement to suit or to respond to the ongoing challenges? And I think with that we have three very important speakers, all experts in their field. And we wish to talk about more on the role of multilateral and regional arrangements to respond to some of these issues. You have all of their biographies on the table, but I think I will very briefly introduce them. So the first speaker is Mr. Iman Pambagyo. Very good morning, Pa Iman. Pa Iman served in 2 periods as the Director General of International Trade Organizations at our Ministry of Trade, and he was also the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to WTO. The second speaker is Dr. Rifan Ardianto, currently the head of the Center for International Trade Policy at the Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. And last but not least is Dr. Christian Rick, who is from the United States Study Center at the University of Sydney. So without further ado, I would like to invite Pa Iman to give your remarks, please.
Thank you, Dr. Safia, for the time. Let me, first of all, thanks everyone for inviting me here. Very good morning to you all. To Dr. Brandt, Ambassador above Beste, and all other speakers and participants. It's really my pleasure to be here to share my views about the topic for our session. This is the first session. I think it will set the tone of our detailed discussion further. So let me start from the state of multilateral trading system. It is my readings that the multilateral trading system remains the backbone of global trade. However, we are facing 4 realities here. First is the disrespect of agreed rules and principles. To me, bilateral arrangement with the U.S. based on the term and condition set by Washington breaches the very nature of WTO principles and agreement. In particular, perhaps Article 24 of the GATT. how one country, member of WTO, first raise their tariff and then negotiate with others to lower the tariff, right? So it is not the way we did business in the past. Second is the erosion of trust. There's a lot of unilateral trade measures, weaponization of tariffs and subsidies to meet the geopolitical targets. The third is the fragmentation of supply chains. We know about the friendshoring, nearshoring, containment policies, security becoming the basis of industrial policies. So it is not merely a business or commercial consideration, but also security. And the fourth is the slow reform process of the WTO, especially on dispute settlement and new rules for digital trade, sustainable standards, and industrial policies. In short, the system, the multilateral trading system under the auspices of WTO is still needed based as the baseline and reference points. So when we negotiate the CEPA between Indonesia and the EU, the baseline is the WTO agreements. That's the reference points. But what we observe these days, countries try to negotiate bilaterally with the US with the term and conditions set by Washington, which can change every moment, right? So in short, again, the WTO system is not fully delivering. We need to reform the WTO in terms of decision-making, restoring dispute settlement mechanism, managing industrial subsidies in terms of the transparency, and creating rules that reflect today's challenges, such as digital economy and sustainable issues. I think the speech delivered by our Vice Minister of Trade quite inspiring in that regard. The second is about the ASEAN in a fragmented trade landscape. Apart from, to me, rather disappointing ASEAN week last month, ASEAN's various propositions should remain predictability, openness, and centrality. Those are the three pillars of ASEAN work in the past few decades. In Southeast Asia, we do not choose between major powers. We choose stability and prosperity. And remember, ASEAN strength include more than 700 million population, the world's fastest growing middle class. We have the RCEP, uniting major economies in East Asia. Some of ASEAN member states is the member of CPTPP. Indonesia is now looking into joining these groups. And there's a strong FDI diversification interest from global companies into ASEAN. So ASEAN should offer the risking without decoupling. So we look forward to the ASEAN chairmanship next year under the chairmanship of the Philippines. Hopefully we can get a clearer understanding where ASEAN should go in terms of the current changing global landscape. Now, let me talk about also ASEAN and EU. I think the next slide, please. The EU is ASEAN's second largest trading partners and one of the largest investors. Yet the ASEAN-EU trade relationship is underperforming relative to its potential. The reason could be the divergent policy expectation. The EU prioritizes sustainability, while ASEAN prioritizes development and market access. We need a shift in narratives. Sustainability and growth are not mutually exclusive. ASEAN wants standards that are predictable, proportional, and not disguised as trade barriers. The right question is not more standards or less standards, but rather, can we design standards that enable rather than exclude? So I think when I started this Indonesia-EU CEPA negotiation, that's the spirit that I try to inject in our conversation. we are not at the same level of development, but we understand that, of course, it is important for Indonesia to look into the EU regulatory approach, how to develop facilitative regulations for the thriving of business and so on and so forth. So again, can we design standards that enable rather than exclude, right? Now, I'm talking about the Indonesia-EU SEPA. Congratulations for Indonesia and the EU for concluding this 10 years negotiation. I managed to be part of this negotiation up to end of 2020. And then, of course, COVID-19 prevented us from seeing each other. But nevertheless, through this online negotiation, we get some more traction. And again, congratulations to both Indonesia and the EU for the completion. To me, the SEPA would enable diversification, industrial upgrading, and regulatory cooperation between Indonesia and the EU. And there's a chapter called Economic Cooperation and Capacity Building. Let me tell you how difficult it was to convince the EU delegation, in particular my dear colleague Helena Koenig, to convince EU to have this chapter, because the argument was that there's no such chapters in EU's earlier agreements with other countries. But I said, well, we come from a different level of development, and I could not sell this package to the parliament without any capacity building and economic cooperation chapters. And I'm glad that it is there in this agreement. And to me, it is not about a charity project where Indonesia just gets fund and project from the EU. It is about improving Indonesia's capacity to meet the EU compliance requirements, right? So it is important for Indonesia to learn how to meet the compliance requirement applied by the EU. So the goal of this SEPA should be fairness, predictability, but also proportionality. Again, these two parties comes from a different level of economic development. So the EU could not pretend that Indonesia can meet all the requirements from the EU at once. There should be a capacity building process to which Indonesia will try to meet the requirements. Now, lastly, on Indonesia and Germany. Germany is I think, one of the most trusted partners and technology powerhouse from Indonesia's point of view. Right? And it is important for us to have this continued dialogue between Indonesia and Germany. Indonesia offer market access and strategic resources, and Germany may bring technology and quality standards. Indonesia need to learn a lot from Germany in terms of technology and standards. And the two countries can cooperate to establish future supply chains, which is green, resilient, and inclusive. So, in conclusion, then, let me see my notes for the conclusion. Okay. First, the world is reshaping value chains. Multilateralism should be part of the solution, not a casualty. ASEAN can be a stabilizing force, and Indonesia-EU SEPA can be a model of how to align sustainability and development. And we must move from where to produce to how to produce responsibly together. I think I will stop there, and I will looking forward to Q&A later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pa Iman, especially for the insights from the negotiations during the EU-SEPA negotiations. And I do think that hearing this, it really reminds us how some of the bilateral arrangements are used as an alternative way when the multilateral frameworks are really facing a lot of pressure. I'll move on to the second speaker, please, Dr. Rifan Ardianto.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning for all of us. Thank you. First, I will allow me to say thank you to Dr. Safia as our moderator, and also Pak Iman and Mr. Christian. I also like to express the appreciation for this opportunity for us to share our views and also perspective on the new global economic arrangement, the role of the multilateral and regional arrangement that involve the structure of the global trading system, and also share about how Indonesia play a role in shaping fair, open, and sustainable economic order. I think I will not give a lot of presentation because I believe that everyone already know about the multilateral trading system, but I will just giving some additional information. Maybe the slide. Maybe I will still talking, still preparing the slide. As we know that the integration into the world economy has resulted in a powerful tool for countries to boost not only economic growth, but also for the economic development. The global trading system is undergoing a fundamental structural transformation driven by the resurgence of the geoeconomic and also major supply chain disruption. The trade itself, as we know, that has provided a significant contribution to the GDP, not only for the global GDP, but also has a contribution to the national GDP for each country. However, some momentum, like maybe Bu Wamen say, there's some momentum such as financial crisis, as we know in 1998 and also 2008, and the last COVID-19 has created the uncertainty in the global economy. We can maybe there's a picture in my presentation that we can see that there is an increase of the global economic policy uncertainty index from 1997 to 2025. It could be we can see that this uncertainty shaped the global trade especially, and also the multilateral trading system is one of the global mechanism. The multilateral trading system is premised on the principle of non-discrimination, seeking to maximize aggregate global welfare through efficiency. While we know the bilateral trade agreement, also the trade mechanism is characterized by the preferential trade agreement, free trade agreement, and also more comprehensive we call SEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. The bilateral trade agreement itself is inherently selective, prioritizing preferential treatment, supply chain resilience, and the strategic alignment of partners. I found study from the World Bank in 2025. The study said that almost 75% of the global trade is now most MFN, most favored national duty-free. Here we can see that the multilateral trading system continues to play a crucial role in maintaining predictability and maximizing global economic growth. However, like Pak Iman say, there is a shift. The trading system is experiencing shift toward bilateral trade. I think we can move to slide number 4. The trading system is experiencing a shift toward bilateral trade characterized by an increased number of trade agreements. We can see there's an emphasized number of preferential tariff agreement in global from until 2025. Adopting bilateral and multilateral trade approach is challenging. We believe that this adopting those mechanisms reflect a deep awareness that relying on a singular strategy is suboptimal in contemporary global environment. Bilateral agreement, we agree, it is provide flexibility to negotiate context-specific gain. Meanwhile, for the multilateral frameworks, arrangements are essential for establishing a stable trade governance framework, fostering integrated value chain, and also how to enabling comprehensive trade risk diversification. Some economies, I believe, strengthen the bilateral partnership to minimize the geopolitical risk, but we still maintain the consistent with the principle and the rule of the WTO. Nevertheless, like I said before, more than 75% global trade flows still occur under the MFN principle. It means that the multilateral trading system remains the cornerstone of the global trade stability. Okay, next. Indonesia consistently positioned global trade as the main pillar for stability and development of global economic diplomacy, given that it provides legal certainty, non-discrimination, and broad market access for global trade flows. Indonesia's trade policy maintains a balance between multilateral legitimacy and also bilateral flexibility. It doesn't abandon the multilateral trading system rules, but leverage the system to expand global market opportunities. Next. Indonesia, EU, ASEAN, EU are strategically positioned to serve as stabilizing essential for global trade governance amid persistent geo-economic fragmentation. Indonesia supports shaping the new global economic arrangement by three strategy. The first one, how to revitalize the rule-based multilateral system. It is to restore trust and also credibility. The second one, to enhance the openness and strategic resilience, enabling adaptive trade system that support innovation and also supply chain diversification. The last strategy is ensure the global trade system for inclusive benefit, which is systematically aligned with both global and also national needs. Next, I think I will stop my presentation here by giving a remark that multilateralism or multilateral trading system represent a crucial platform in the trade diplomacy, strategically supplemented by bilateral and also regional arrangement. Indonesia envision an international trade framework built on the principle of inclusivity, transparency, rule-based implementation, and of course, development orientation by linking trade outcomes with emerging global priorities, for example, digitalization, green industry, and so on. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rifan, for updating us with the approaches of the current government with regards to the ongoing challenge. Last but not least, Dr. Christian Rick.
Well, thank you, KAS, for having me, also to be able to speak in such esteemed company. Thank you. Let me make a theoretical argument, and I promise it won't be long, but the discussion here triggered me. There's much talk about the two-level game between the multilateral level, right, and the bilateral level. And yes, bilateral agreements increase in importance when multilateral norms come under pressure. So this doesn't come as a surprise. But what about the regional level? And what about ASEAN, especially in trade, right? So I see this as a three-level game more than just a two-level game, especially here in ASEAN, which is seen in the literature, at least, as being a relatively successful regional integration scheme. All right, so I'll make two arguments. The first is securitization is actually not so bad. It will have a few benefits for countries, but also for regions. And the second one is regional integration organizations remain vital, right? They remain important. these are the two main arguments, I'd say, and what I find interesting from a theoretical standpoint is that regional integration started with trade, but it could also end with it. Right? If we see, if we look at the increasing numbers of bilateral trade agreements. So the geoeconomic age is both a blessing and a curse for regional free trade agreements. And let's start with the curse. Bilaterals could fragment regional free trade agreements. I think this is really an open question. The more bilateral agreements you have, what does this mean for the integrity of the regional free trade agreements? So there's not always compatibility, right? If you do bilateral negotiations, it's not a given, right, that you sort of include the regional norms in this negotiation. But this doesn't mean that the bilateral sort of element is wrong, right? It's useful, but it requires extra political investments or the investment of sort of extra political capital in keeping regional integration mechanisms united and coherent. So that's important because the function is still, I'd say the main function is still that regional associations, so regional integration mechanisms, can increase the voice, right, of smaller states vis-a-vis larger states or superpowers, especially in the new geopolitical age. So we need a rediscovery of political leadership on the regional level and also a rediscovery of this idea of regional public goods, right? And maybe we need a renegotiation. So what do regional public goods mean? Maybe it includes less of an economic element, right? But it includes maybe more of other elements, like, say, the fight against climate change or others. And for this, you need bipartisan support for regional integration. And this is difficult to get in an environment of increasing polarization. But it remains important. So regional integration needs to be depoliticized as a political idea. That's the only way to get bipartisan support. And that's difficult to do, especially if you have less and less stakeholders for regional economic integration, right? Because you focus on other policy areas. So there is a danger that the bilaterals will fragment the regional order, and this will lead to less intra-regional trade, less stakeholders, especially from business, in the past have been sort of a stabilizer for regional integration, and relying more, this means relying even more on interpresidentialism, or what's called in the literature presidential diplomacy, right? So regional integration depends more now and will probably depend even more on sort of the political will and the political attention of the leaders in the region. And this can be a good thing, can be a bad thing, right? It depends on the governments of the day. Let's talk about the blessing for a while. So I'd say there's renewed interest in the West for the global South. Securitization will do this. And you see the increase in the number of bilateral agreements is really an indicator, it's a very good indicator of this renewed interest. And since this interest runs through strategic economic sectors, say rare earths or maybe even productive, so heavy industrial production capacity, so building, say, all the heavy weapon systems and the ships that the West will need, this means that this interest will remain robust. So I think this is good news. So this is true especially for Europe. That is also lessening its dependency on China, right, as you all know, especially on Chinese strategic resources, to increase its own strategic autonomy. But I would say it's even true for the United States, because I see the unpredictability of US trade policy will be reduced, at least in the mid to long term, right? So we're seeing sort of a rebalancing of the global economic order, and the tariff weapon will lose force. Right? You can't keep coercing economically the rest of the world. It just, the more decoupling you have, the less powerful this weapon becomes. So I think this will end, or at least it will become more predictable, so easier to manage. And the dependence on strategic resources will remain, even in the United States. Right? So this is another stabilizer for this new global order. Then I'd say multi-alignment could strengthen regional integration mechanisms if they're seen by their members as improving their collective bargaining power vis-a-vis the great states or the superpowers in the world. So this means regional integration organizations remain relevant. And the third argument here is geopolitical rivalry could lead to deeper security integration in the world, in the non-Western world regions, especially in ASEAN. Right? So what I'm trying to say is, so the more assertive China becomes, right, in the region, the more there's a demand for for hedging against sort of Chinese assertiveness, but also maybe for active balancing, and this could lead to deeper security integration. And it's a theoretical argument, so this might be valid for other world regions too. But the geoeconomic age will probably entrench existing political and economic hierarchies, and that's a big problem. Right? So if we look at development theory, developing states, but also emerging countries will probably see, I'd say, a reprimarization of their economy and a deindustrialization of their economy. Right? Because if you focus more on high-value exports, like, say, rare earths or natural resources, right, this will endanger the levels of industrialization. And industrialization, as you all know, is difficult to achieve, and so this might become more fragile. So that's bad news. On the other side, if you have achieved a certain level of industrialization, there will be a push towards more and deeper and higher value industrialization and technology transfer. Yeah? Look at South Korea. It's a very interesting case, and we'll see, and this is what I mean by entrenching an existing hierarchy. South Korea already has the productive capacity. It's already sort of a heavy industrial behemoth, right? And this will be sort of increase, right? Its industrial power, right? But what does this say about countries who haven't yet achieved that level of industrial development? So the West, and especially Europe, look to widen its productive capacity for heavy manufacturing, so I'd say weapon systems, but also ships. And this means that this, what I call the European Zeitenwende, so there's a new geopolitical, a new defense posture in Europe that will become global and will have industrial ramifications around the world. So, but I see this as good news and sort of at the end of the day. So my last point now is the role of Europe. So what should Europe do here, right? So we're not the United States, so we don't believe in economic coercion. Also, we don't have the political will to use an economic weapon like this because it's so hard in Europe to get consensus on anything that's foreign policy related or geopolitical. But that's a good thing, I'd say, because it strengthens the multilateral order. So there's a new balance between multilateralism and bilateralism even in the EU, right? So this is quite clear, but Europe remains the main protagonist when it comes to supporting and also financially supporting regional economic integration initiatives around the world, right? So this will not change because it's part and parcel, it's part of the DNA of Europe as an economic integration agreement. So Europe will continue to support coherence, or should support coherence in regional integration mechanisms, especially ASEAN, right? So this could be a role. We could help by funding the institutionalization of ASEAN to bring about this coherence, right? And this political will, and help countries align around particular topics. Europe will globalize the sourcing of rare earths and strategic resources for defense tech, but also the energy transformation and other areas, so this will remain relevant. Europe should globalize and will globalize its supply chains in heavy manufacturing, right? So this will go on. It's a role for Europe. Why? Because the economic fragmentation and the industrial fragmentation within the EU is so large that the EU will have to look abroad when it comes to rebuilding its industrial capacity, unlike the United States. And these are more normative arguments, I'd say Europe needs to liberalize its arms exports systems, and especially Germany, but also others, and should support military or defense integration regimes in the world regions, so in regional integration mechanisms like ASEAN. And this will be quite controversial, but I see this as a potential role for Europe if we can help bring about deeper integration in other areas. If the economic area is coming under pressure, then at the end of the day, securitization will be more of a blessing than a curse. Thank you.
So much, Dr. Christian Rick. I think that's a very interesting observation. You know, not only looking at the multilateral level or the bilateral arrangements, but also focusing on the regional arrangements. And I think that was quite interesting how you highlighted of how some of the things that the EU can actually contribute in terms of these regional arrangements. I have one sort of like housekeeping update to everyone here. So the coordinating minister for economic affairs of the Republic of Indonesia has already arrived. So we might have to postpone our Q&A if that's okay with you and allow the minister to deliver his keynote, and then we will continue. So we will have more time actually for discussions. But while we wait for the minister to arrive, I'm still intrigued by your observation about how the EU can actually contribute in terms of ASEAN regional arrangements. I would like to ask, either Pak Iman or Pak Irfan, whether you agree with this. Is there really a role that the European Union or any of the European countries can do in terms of improving the regional arrangements within ASEAN? Please, Pak Iman.
Yes, I think there's a role for EU to provide some reference point or perhaps learning points for ASEAN to integrate our economy. I recall that the argument was that ASEAN is not a single economy like EU with a single currency and so on and so forth, and ASEAN is not a custom union like the EU, but my response was that, well, in the future, through the digital technology and later on AI, is it possible for ASEAN to have a single custom union, for example? It is possible where the technology can track the ship flowing in the ASEAN area. So yes, there's the potential for ASEAN to learn from the EU. Of course, it is not immediately applicable to ASEAN due to this fact that ASEAN represent all level of development. We have most developed economies in the region. We have emerging economies in the region, and we have least developed economies in the region. But anyhow, ASEAN could learn from the EU how to integrate the economy to be a single production base and single market.
Thank you.
Can I pick up on this really
Yes,
quickly?
1 minute.
I didn't want to come across as patronizing, right? So I don't believe the EU has so many lessons for ASEAN. We can also learn from ASEAN too when it comes to the acceptance of minilaterals within the regional integration scheme. So I think that's a sort of, it should be a two-way street. And also when I mean sort of helping align interests, the EU should sort of provide a framework so that ASEAN countries, right, can come up with solutions to sort of regional integration problems.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's hold the discussion, hold that thought for a bit because the minister is about to enter. So we'll step down for the duration of the speech of the minister, but please think of some interesting questions to ask the panelists. We'll be back for the discussion right after the keynote speech. So thank you. So for the time being, let's give a round of applause to our three speakers, but we'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the first panel. We will resume this panel very briefly after the speech from the Coordinating Minister of Economic Affairs, as he will be arriving in the auditorium very soon. So while we do some arrangements on the stage, we would like to ask you to please wait kindly and patiently in your seats while we wait for the minister to arrive. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with applause Mr. Airlangga Hartarto, the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Please, a big round of applause, everyone. Mr. Airlangga Hartarto will be delivering a keynote speech of the future of EU-Indonesia economic relations. We would like to immediately invite Pa Airlangga up to the front of the stage to deliver his keynote speech.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. Yang kami hormati Pak Sofyan Wanandi, Excellency Ralf Beste, Ambassador Designated Federal Republic of Germany to Republic Indonesia, Pak Jose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director CSIS, Dr. Christoph Brandt, Board Member and Treasurer of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, Pak Denis, Pak Antonio Ripoll, Minister Counselor Parliamentary Relation EU Delegation to ASEAN, Pak Iman Pambagyo, dan Deputy dari Kemenko ada Pak Ellen, Pak Edi Pambudi, kemudian juga Pak Haryo. Good morning and thank you to the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and CSIS Indonesia for inviting me in the Germany-Indonesia Strategic Dialogue. It is an honor for me to deliver the speech on a theme trade and competitiveness in a changing global landscape. Today, I would like to share Indonesia perspective on how we can build a stronger and more resilient partnership between EU and Indonesia, learning from past trade negotiation and turning this opportunity for cooperation and growth. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the global economy continues to face uncertainties and unpredictability and have reshaped the trade flow, supply chains, as well as investment pattern around the world. Despite the headwinds, growth rate in Indonesia stay above 5% and inflation well contained about 2.8%, and our external balance continue to record healthy surpluses. As global landscape become more fragmented, strengthening cooperation with trusted partners like EU become even more critical. President Prabowo has underlined the strengthening Indonesia economic resilience requires expanding market access and accelerating the trade cooperations. President reaffirmed Indonesia commitment to finalize the Indonesia-EU SEPA as a key pillar to boost growth and job creation. EU is already among Indonesia's 5 largest trading partners with around trade surplus around 4.5 billion in 2025. The substantial conclusion of the EU SEPA that announced last month in Bali on September 23rd, and the agreement spans in the areas such as on trade, investment, intellectual property, sustainable development, SME cooperation, as well as an upgrade for a digital ecosystem and digital partnership. This is an upgraded version of the EU SEPA that is much more advanced in compare with any other SEPA that is signed by EU. So expected that Indonesia could raise the export by 58% to boosting GDP by around 20 basis point, around additional 2.8 billion. In the past 2 decades, trade between Indonesia and EU has grown steadily, and the trade balance will be on the Indonesian side, and hopefully we can increase the trade between the two economies. EU SEPA go beyond market access, strengthen investment, value creation, and competitiveness. It's over the regulatory clarity, wider access, and commitment for sustainability issues. EU investor can support Indonesia for downstream industry in the green transition, including the access for critical mineral. Indonesia is one of the top 5 investor with 15.6 billion FDI from EU, and I think deeper integration to the global value chains is required. With the conclusion of EU SEPA, EU Union role for Indonesia is evolving from trading partners to a strategic investment partners, and we can develop value-added industry, create jobs, and accelerate the industrialization. The standard of Europe can now will be open for the Indonesian market, and also for the halal registrations with mutual recognition arrangement and agreement. The EU halal product can be immediately got an access to the Indonesian market. The EU SEPA also open Indonesia product that has been in Europe for many centuries, like coffee, cacao, rubber, as well as palm oil, furniture, and electronics that can enjoy the zero import duty to the EU. So 0 to 0 commitment, I think, comply about 90% of product from both sides, from EU as well as from Indonesia. Import pharmaceutical, vehicle, industry machineries, and electronics, I think that is something that is needed by Indonesia for the capital goods, in which in the past Indonesia mostly rely on other ASEAN countries for capital expenditures. But now the technology transfer is open, and hopefully will increase the Indonesian capability in enhancing the technology in the global supply chain. So to fully capture the benefit of EU SEPA, government has focused on strengthening the domestic readiness and policy coordinations, and government has created a task force to eliminate the challenges, as well as to create much more investment friendly in the Indonesian government. And government has review and renew the new regulations for the investment. That is the online single submission through the Board of Investment will be accelerated with fictive positive regulations that until a certain days of service level agreement between ministry, then the license will be automatically issued by the Board of Investment. So hopefully this will be creating a new investment climate that is more pro-business. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the momentum of conclusion of EU SEPA must be fully utilized to deepen economic cooperation with close collaborations among the government, business community, and research institution or stakeholders such as CSIS and KAS. So I think I'm glad to be here to give a message that the government is open for business, and the government is open for any advice. Of course, it is up to the government whether we'll take the advice or not. So that's, I think, the role of the government elsewhere. We receive any advice, any paper, any the needs of the investment, and I think Indonesia and Germany are need to be a strong partner. We have been a strong partner in the past, so we need to become stronger in the future. And I think with the Indonesia SEPA and the support of the German government, which Indonesia is very close, and in the showcase of the closeness of Indonesia with Indonesia participate as a country partner in Hannover Messe few years back, and I think with that the German government are discussing about Indonesia almost on weekly basis. So I think now it's time to act, because the environment, the ecosystem is there. So Indonesia is ready for acting together for the benefit of the Indonesian people. Thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you fruitful and meaningful discussion. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Minister. We ask for you to please stay on the stage so that we can take a group photo. I would also like to invite the other deputies from the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs, and we'd also like to invite Mr. Sofyan Wanandi on the stage, His Excellency Ralf Beste, Dr. Yose Rizal Damuri, Dr. Christoph Brandt, Dr. Denis Suarsana, and also Mr. Antoine Ripoll to join us upon the stage. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining the picture. And once again, we would also like to thank Mr. Airlangga Hartarto, the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, for delivering his keynote speech. All right, and as we are setting up the stage once again, we would also like to invite back our first panel. Our first panel, I'd like to invite our moderator back, Ibu Shafiah Muhibat, and also our speakers, Mr. Iman Pambagyo, Dr. Rifan Ardianto, Dr. Christian E. Rick, to join us upon the stage once again to resume the question and answer session. Please. I think we owe this panel a round of applause for their resilience in adapting for the new schedule. Please, everyone, thank you very much, panel one, for your patience.
Thank you so much, Nadia. And also thank you, everyone. Thank you to panelists for bearing with us of this sudden change of schedule. But I think that we still have about, 15 to 20 minutes for discussion. So I think that's an ample amount of time. So why don't we pick up where we left off? But Pak Rifan, you were about to also join in on the discussion when we were talking about EU's contribution to ASEAN regional arrangements. Would you like to pick up on that thought, please?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with Pak Iman also, Christian, regarding to the ASEAN could be learning from the EU. However, even in ASEAN, we're still looking for, there's a challenging, right? There's a challenging for the ASEAN member country to have integration of economic like EU itself. And also, maybe I can give some suggestion for the ASEAN also to create some measurement to determine how the ASEAN can integrate the economic. For example, like we know when we talk about the partnership or the talking about the cooperation, we look for the geopolitical distance, geo-economic distance, and we can discuss how to manage on those. So the ASEAN could be have learned with EU to get the economic integration, something like that. Yeah.
I think those are some very useful suggestions. So I'd like to invite members of the audience to also join in on our discussion. If you have any comments, questions, anything to add to any of the remarks that have been made, please raise your hand so I can see you if you want to join in on the discussion. Okay, if you still need time to think, that's fine. I'll get back to you again in a few moments. But let's just, for the moment, really discuss, continue our discussion. So we're basically talking about, the problems at the multilateral level, and then using, either the bilateral arrangements or regional arrangements. But I think I'm not sure if I can, I'm making this point right, or if I'm mistaken, then please let me know. But I do think that countries like Indonesia, we're still sometimes having difficulty in figuring out, what are the issues that can be dealt with at the bilateral channels, and what are some of the issues that are best dealt with at the regional level. Sometimes we put everything in the ASEAN basket, and then ASEAN, with the limitations, there are only so much that they can do. I don't know, I'm posing this question to both Pa Iman and then also Pa Rifan. Do you see it, the same way? And also to Dr. Rick, if you're also, observing ASEAN as a whole and the workings of ASEAN, is there really such problems in identifying, what issues are best dealt with at the bilateral levels and what issues are, something that you should do at the regional level?
My observation is the way I see it is that first, of course, we have the baseline, which is the WTO agreement and principles, and if we can gather with some countries in the region or perhaps bilateral arrangement to come with WTO plus arrangement, then we go for regional. But if we see the merits of getting deeper with particular countries in a hope that we can exchange more, perhaps investment, technology cooperation, education, and so on and so forth, I think Indonesia would look into the possibility of having bilateral arrangement, which is WTO plus plus actually. So there's no particular formula in Indonesia's trade agenda with other countries, but that's perhaps the basis for Indonesia to think whether we should go into bilateral or regional. In ASEAN, for example, we have the ASEAN plus one, ASEAN-Japan, but we see the merits of having bilateral, particularly with Japan or Korea or with Australia, New Zealand, and so on and so forth. So I think it depends on the benefits offered by bilateral arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, Pa Iman. I don't know, either Pa Rifan or Dr. Rick.
Yep. I think I agree with Pa Iman, and so I think for decision to choose between the bilateral and regional arrangements depends on the objective of the cooperation itself. For example, if Indonesia want to make a specific negotiation, I think the bilateral will take a place on that. But also when we want to say that this cooperation also have a benefit for the regional, ASEAN could be as a tools for Indonesia to get the cooperation on the trade. So I think it depends on the objective of the cooperation itself.
Thank you.
Yes, if I compare this to the EU, and I understand it's the most bureaucratized, most institutionalized economic agreement in the world, and it could grow, the EU could grow into something beyond trade because of the institutionalization, right? So there's a reflex in Europe, and this is not a lesson for the rest of the world, right? There's a reflex in European member states, EU member states, to sort of look to the EU level, right? And to sort of delegate international negotiations to the EU. But this is a function of the capacity, right, of the brain power and the level of institutionalization of the EU proper, right? And all the other regional free trade agreements have small secretariats, right? So I'd say what's useful in such settings is to think about, in inverted commas, a constitutional document, right? Where countries can sort of come up with a plan, right, on where to deposit the sovereignty, right? So which policy area should go where, right? What kind of agreements should be negotiated where, on the regional or on the bilateral level? Because otherwise, if you don't do this, then the larger states will feel a temptation to go the bilateral way, and the smaller states, because they have less capacity when it comes to negotiations, but will be left out, right? Or they will lose out from bilateral agreements, right? And this is why for the smaller states, the regional level is usually more important than for the larger states.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go to the audience now. So I see one hand up. You can use the microphone in front of you. If you could introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Yes, hello. Selamat siang, terima kasih. My name is Philip Hirsch. I'm at the German Embassy where I cover ASEAN mostly. And I have a question regarding the recent summit and trade agreements. I think it's probably directed towards Pak Iman or Pak Rifan. There was a number of trade agreements signed or announced at the ASEAN summit. There is China-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement Upgrade 3.0. There was a second amendment to Artiga. There was an announcement to have a free trade agreement with Canada. The Secretary General last week mentioned there will also be a trade agreement with Korea. So it's sort of, there's also ASEAN +3 format statement regarding trade, and also a statement regarding RCEP and the deepening and widening of RCEP. So it's almost too much of a good thing, you know, and I was wondering, there's so many trade agreements, so many announcements, what can we actually make of them? Are there numbers? Is there an expectation of how much trade is actually going to increase? So far I couldn't find any. Which ones of these announcements are maybe the bigger ones, and should we maybe rather understand them as political signaling in view of the tariff situation right now? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone like to quickly pick up on the question? Pak Iman, please.
Thank you for the questions. I wasn't part of the delegation of Indonesia to this particular summit, but I'd rather see from a different perspective. I could not come with numbers whether those particular agreements will yield a particular increase in export, for example, or investment, but rather perhaps my worry is that the spirit of ASEAN centrality sitting at the driving seat of the regional integration begin to fade away, because any bilateral arrangement pursued by members should be aligned with the ASEAN integration agenda. There are areas where ASEAN has no particular agreement and they could go bilateral, but if it is about something else that affect the vision of ASEAN, then there should be a coordination among ASEAN countries to come up with a common regional position. And in particular, perhaps the most interesting development was that some ASEAN countries secured a bilateral agreement with the US. To me, it is not a good sign, because it seems to me that the ASEAN falls into this not cafeteria approach, but beauty contest. Who gets the best from Mr. Trump, right? So there's no media here, right? So it is not the way ASEAN should go. Again, it should be rules-based. I am with everyone for bilateral, regional, or multilateral, plurilateral, as long as we have a clear reference point, and it is the WTO agreement and principles. We agree that WTO agreement is not perfect. It should be updated. It should be reformed, decision-making process, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't mean that we could just, come up with our own terms and reference, terms and conditions in negotiating bilateral trade. You can imagine if there's no reference point in any negotiation, like the one that we have with Washington, then we can see this impossible situation where countries try to, develop their own trade agenda with different countries. So perhaps that's my response to the particular question. It may not directly answer your question, but that perhaps covers the idea behind why thinking about what the situation in last week summit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I cannot answer that question for now, but I believe that the ASEAN now is still focused on how to maintain the economic integration. Some agenda regarding to the ASEAN chapter and so on is still to updating ASEAN for the current situation, like a geo-economic and geopolitics and so on. So I think that's still the ASEAN still focus on that, and then still to focus to increase the capacity building, to harmonize the standard, the technical regulation among the ASEAN member staff. So I think that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I can expand on your point. You say it's maybe too much of a good thing. And the first point I was trying to make is exactly what we've just heard, is that regional integration started with trade, but it might end with trade if there's too much fragmentation. So the argument I was trying to make is that if this new geopolitical, this new geoeconomic age can help to deepen integration in other non-trade areas, it will renew the legitimacy of ASEAN and other regional integration schemes, and this will then might make it easier, right, to re-energize the trade agenda.
Okay, can I invite more questions? Yes, please.
My name is Michelle. I'm from UPH. Yeah, actually, it's a bit. My question is about the RCEP. So the role of regional arrangement RCEP. So we have this RCEP, but also ASEAN plus one keep updating. There isn't one ASEAN plus China. So how are RCEP going to catching up with this development of ASEAN plus one, which is maybe a bilateral arrangement? So in the end, if like it's not utilized and the other one still upgrading, so the regional one might be obsolete in the end. They won't use it because for us, like maybe like for example ASEAN and China said, oh, maybe it's better through this arrangement. It's easy, for example, for standard and so on, rather than we're going with these 15 countries. So you have bilateral here, regional, but then this is keep upgrading. Maybe it's more like up to development, but this is not being used and never been used, but this have a lot of potential. So I would like to have from the panel your view on this fragmentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Pak Iman, I believe you're also the chief negotiator for RCEP at one time, so maybe you'd like to comment on that.
Yes, I was a poor guy chairing this negotiation. I think it is up to the member states. If a business would like to use or to utilize the bilateral ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand, for example, or ASEAN, Japan, EPA, for example, it's up to the business to decide, of course. But I tend to see from different perspective or points with regard to the RCEP. RCEP offers similar rules of origin. You need just one RCEP certificate of origin for your business to export to the other 14 countries. Just one certificate of origin. And in terms of regional value chains, you could accumulate from different countries. If ASEAN plus one, let's say ASEAN Korea, you could develop the regional value chain between ASEAN and Korea. But how about the other countries? How about China? How about Australia or New Zealand or other countries? But under the RCEP, you just accumulate all those supply chains into ones. Of course, based on my observation and also my interview with some business in Indonesia, they said that, well, I'm familiar with the ASEAN-China rules of origin and certification standard as well. I'm familiar with the Indonesia, ASEAN-Korea or Indonesia-Korea agreement. But I think moving forward, as we try to develop resilient regional value chains, I think RCEP should be on the spot to be utilized by business in the region. And keep in mind that RCEP is not a close, exclusive regional arrangement. There are some requests from, I think, Chile, Hong Kong, China, Bangladesh, and I heard one more, I think, is it Taiwan or something? They want to join the RCEP. But the question is that whether or not RCEP participating countries can further accelerate the implementation, the utilization of the RCEP, so business could see the merits of, utilizing the RCEP arrangement. That would be my response to you, Michelle. Thank you.
We at CSIS are also very strong supporters of RCEP. Would anyone like to make a quick addition to? No? Okay, if not, because we've been talking a lot about Trump's trade policies in Southeast Asia and all these bilateral dealings. So I think it's high time we move to the next session, which will exclusively discuss Trump's trade legacy in Southeast Asia. I think that's a very interesting title. So, but before we do that, can I ask you to join me giving appreciation to the three excellent panelists for this morning. Thank you so much, and I hand back to Nadia, the MC.
Thank you very much, Mbak Fifi, for moderating this session, and also thank you for our panelists, Mr. Iman Pambagyo, Dr. Rifan Ardianto, and Dr. Christian E. Riek. So as you exit the stage, I would also like to introduce the second panel, which will be moderated by Dr. Lina Alexandra, the Head Department of International Relations at CSIS Indonesia. And I would also like to invite our speakers for this panel, Dr. Jayant Menon, Senior Fellow at the ICS Yusuf Ishak Institute, and Mr. Tim Fenigus, Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Unternehmer Baden-Württemberg, IFO Stuttgart. As we are waiting for the stage to be set, I would like to welcome all of our moderators and panelists for this session. Over to you, Mbak Lina.
Well, thank you, everyone. So we will continue to the panel 2, as my colleague, Dr. Fifi, mentioned earlier. I think there is a nice segue there, actually, because in the first session and also in the keynote speeches that we have listened, we have learned so much about the challenges arising from the new global economic arrangement, on how various multilateral and regional arrangements should be strengthened to advance more resilient and inclusive economic cooperation amidst the very challenging, the very unpredictable, trade relations because of the Trump policy. And this session, I think, definitely specifically dedicated to discuss, to flesh out more in details about, the strategic risks and also opportunities that are arising as well. And in this context, Southeast Asia is definitely one of the most impacted regions from the so-called Trump's Liberation Day, reciprocal tariff policy. And this session will look into the strategic enduring effects of these dynamics particularly on Southeast Asia's economic landscape, and how EU in this context as a long-time partner can position itself even deeper as a strategic and constructive partner for Southeast Asia. And we also aware that the European Union countries also facing critical challenges from the Trump's unpredictable policies. So without further ado, we don't have much time, until the lunchtime. So without further ado, I would like now to invite the first speaker, Dr. Jayant Menon, the Senior Fellow from ICS Yusuf Ishak Institute based in Singapore, to give his presentation. Please, Dr. Jayant.
Thank you very much, Lina. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. And let me start by thanking both the CSIS, KAS-CSIS, a long-time supporter of ICS as well, where I work, so we're very grateful for that. And of course, lots of friends between ICS and CSIS too. So very pleased to be here. So let me try and say a little bit about, firstly, what ASEAN is facing. I think I agree fully with Lena when she says Southeast Asia is the region that's been particularly hard hit, especially from the Liberation Day tariffs. But even now that they've come down, it's still a major concern for exporters. And I want to then look at what are the options facing exporters in dealing directly with these tariffs. I want to highlight 4 options, and then finally look at where we might go from here in terms of future opportunities. And this is where I want to bring in, the EU, and also to think big and to consider maybe a new type of mega bloc tying together the various other mega regionals that can try and revive multilateralism. So this is very much in the context that we are moving towards a post-US world, a truly multipolar world. My view, and I'm hoping I'm wrong, my view is that the shift we've seen in the US under Trump will not end with Trump, assuming that he actually leaves at the end of the 4 years. But even then, and irrespective of who comes in next, whether it's Republican or Democrat, I think this is a systemic shift that will affect the region for many years to come. Okay, so this is where we are right now with the tariffs facing Southeast Asia. You can see they're mostly around 20% now. Indonesia is at 19%. Poor Laos and Myanmar, 2 countries going through a lot of difficulties right now, facing 40% for no good reason. Well, there's no good reason for any of these tariffs, but they are particularly hard hit. And this is the dollar amounts of the trade balance as of last year for each of the ASEAN countries with the US. You can see Vietnam is out there at 120 billion. So for the US, Vietnam is particularly important in bringing down their overall trade deficit, more so than any other country. But you can see, Thailand and Malaysia, Indonesia also have significant surpluses with the US, except for Singapore, which actually has a small deficit, and that's why they have the minimum 10%. But you can see Laos, Myanmar, and Brunei there, you can hardly see any blue bar, yet they have the highest tariffs. So, it's just nonsensical, all of this Trump policies on tariffs. Well, actually, let me correct that slightly. It's not nonsensical. It's a set of tariffs that a bully would design. It's designed to maximize coercive bargaining power, right? Based on your dependence on the US market. But that's not a way to treat your trading partners. Okay, so what are the 4 options? Let me go through quickly as I'm aware of time. Firstly, I think for exporters in Indonesia and the rest of the region, they can fully pass through the tariff. And so the tariff will be reflected in higher consumer and producer prices in the US, and there'll be no change to profit margins for ASEAN exporters or any exporters with full pass-through. Now, if this happens, there is a risk of losing market share depending on the level of competition, your relative tariffs, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the first option, and the international evidence suggests that this is what is most likely in the long run. In the short run, there can be some absorption of the tariff. Trump thinks that there'll be full absorption of the tariff even in the long run. He keeps talking about eat the tariff, right? And that's what he means. He means that foreigners will pay the tariff by reducing their prices, not domestic consumers or domestic producers that use imports for their exports, right? And he says this because during the first trade war, Trump 1.0, the trade war with China, China did in fact absorb some of the tariffs for products like steel and so on, but that was the exception rather than the rule, right? And there, remember, it was only China. Now everyone is being hit by tariffs. And actually the differences across countries have narrowed. The differences in tariff rates have narrowed since Liberation Day, after they had the second round following the pause of new tariffs. So there's not that much differences. So if everyone is facing pretty much the same tariff and there's not much domestic competition, there's no point in absorbing the tariff because it's unlikely that you will lose market share. Right. The third option, of course, is to reconfigure supply chains to try and minimize the final tariffs that you face. Now, we've seen a lot of this happening again with the first US-China trade war, the first Trump term. This might continue. A lot will depend on the final rate between US and China, right? And we might find that out very soon. But until then, it's hard to be sure. Alternatively, and this is something that's being encouraged by the US administration, firms can actually shift to the US to get behind the tariff wall. In fact, a lot of this happened when the EU was established, so-called tariff jumping FDI. But the world is very different now compared to when the time when the EU was formed. Now we live in a world of global supply chains, which is a complex web of nodes scattered all throughout the world. So you can't simply slice or shift large parts of that network to another country because of a small tariff. It's usually not worthwhile or, in fact, very easy to do. So it's a bit the world is very different now. And this kind of reshoring is not as easy as it might have been. Now, finally, of course, you can diversify markets, right? The US has gone out of its way to demonstrate that it is not a reliable trade partner. So thinking long term, I think you'd be foolish not to start considering alternatives to reduce country-specific risks. The current high level of dependence of the US market for many ASEAN countries is risky. In fact, any high level of dependence on any country is not a good thing because you're exposed to country-specific shocks. So in this case, it's US. You don't want to be too exposed to China either. I think diversifying your trade patterns is always a good thing, but it's not always easy, especially when everyone is trying to do it at the same time, right? In this chart from the FT, you can see the level of dependence on the US in blue, and then you have China in red, very appropriate. Then you have the EU in light green and ASEAN in light blue. So it varies. You can see that the EU there is significant for few countries, as is China, and the US, when it's important, it's very important. So that's the situation that we are currently faced with, and it's actually trying to even up those bars, bring down the blue, and where the red or the green is not very big, you want to expand that to offset and diversify trade patterns. Now, this is a chart that I think I drew. Maybe it's already out there, I wouldn't be surprised. But thinking about the future, we've heard already from the minister from the earlier panel how there's a need to try and increase regional cooperation, but also as these regional groupings look to expand, like RCEP and CPTPP, they should also look at the possibilities of greater collaboration between each other. I don't think it's sensible to speak of mergers. These are, independent entities with their own identities, but stronger links, stronger cooperation between RCEP and CPTPP on the one hand, and with the EU on the other. If these three groupings could be linked up, it would cover 2/3 of the world's GDP, right? This would be a significant block. And we already see, for instance, that 9 out of the 12 CPTPP members have bilateral FTAs with the EU, right? And the ones that don't, Malaysia, Australia, and they are negotiating FTAs with the EU. It won't be difficult to do one with Brunei, a small city state. And then the EU is also negotiating FTAs with the Philippines, with India, and so on. So a lot is in train. I think the voluntary exit of the US from multilateralism is creating the right environment to push a lot of these alternative negotiations forward. Things that appeared insurmountable in the past may no longer be that way, given the current climate created by US exit from multilateralism and the rising protectionism. So I think this is less of a pipe dream today than it might have been before Trump 2.0. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I think we could see the possibility of much greater cooperation while we try and still revive the WTO. I think maybe necessarily without the US, right? When the US decided to paralyze the dispute settlement mechanism, 57 countries got together to form an alternative, right? The MPIA, the multi-party arbitration system. And that already covers 60% of world trade. So the WTO can be revived with or without the US. We hope the US will return. But if they won't, then we also have to consider hand in hand alternative mega blocks like the one in front of you. So with that, let me stop there. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Menon. I think it's very, very comprehensive elaboration about what has ASEAN experienced in particular, and about the options available for exporters, you know. And I think the last option, I think, is something that we might want to delve into further, because diversifying markets, I think that's something that can pull Southeast Asia, ASEAN, and EU closer. But the mega block, the last presentation about the mega block, I think that's super interesting, definitely, because when you mentioned about we all, you know, really, you know, in the verge of, you know, seeing the value of WTO. But now you said, I think that's really an option that WTO can be invoked with this mega block. So now I'd like to move to the second speaker, Mr. Tim Weniges, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer from Unternehmer Baden Württemberg e.V. Stuttgart. I'm pretty sorry if I pronounce it wrongly, but time is yours, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. As a personal note, I'm very glad to be back in Jakarta. I was here from 2005 to 2007. I was allowed to teach, also with my colleague Michel, at the Universitas Pelita Harapan, and I was consultant at the Constitutional Court, Mahkamah Konstitusi, with President Jimli at that time. So I'm very glad to be back. You mentioned the German term Unternehmer Baden-Württemberg, hard to pronounce. It's an association of entrepreneurs and an association of industry and business associations. So we have 65 associations representing 60 sectors, from trade, industry, and services. Baden-Württemberg is, just for your information, a state in the southwest of Germany. It's more or less, I would say, the industrial heart of Europe, with a very high percentage, industrial percentage of GDP, more than 30%, the highest in Europe, and also still the region with the highest spending on research and development in Europe. I just mentioned this to give you an impression why it is so important for us to discuss these issues not only on this level, but also on the European level. I have prepared some slides, but to be honest, many things have been said already, and because of the recent developments between China and the US in the last week, I would like to start with a description why Germany and Europe face this new area of geoeconomics as we see it right now. And I just try to explain why we act and what our interest and intention is, at least from my view. Economies and societies, in my view, always face a trade-off between resilience and efficiency. And this is not only true, by the way, for the business sector. It's also true for political issues, for social issues. You have this kind of trade-off between these different goals. I'm not an academic. I mean, you made this very clear in all these details, but this is, let's say, a view from the business sector where you have to admit that you try to have both at the same time, but most of the time you will opt for one. And Germany had, and Europe, this situation over the last 20 years that we got our security from NATO, especially from the US. We got relatively cheap energy from Russia, and we had a huge market in China to sell our products. The business model was to bring in commodities and spare parts, do value-adding process, highly value-adding process, building cars and machineries, and export them to the world. This was for a long time, the main business model of a country which has no commodities and has no rare earth or anything else. And for the last, let's say, 25 years, we opted in this trade-off for efficiency. So we build up a highly efficient business sector to produce these goods. Efficiency means, in this case, when you have, if you look on a production process, you had a just-in-time or even a just-in-sequence production. If you see a car production, you see that there are spare parts brought to the factory 20 minutes before they were built in. And 20 minutes before they were built in, you have to pay for them. Yeah? So the controllers in such a company have been very successful to have this maximum efficiency in the production. And then a few things happened. We had COVID, we had a ship in the Suez Canal, so we had problems with our supply chains. We had a war between, or we still have a war between, from Russia against Ukraine, and then we had also Trump, and even Trump too. And now we have to rebalance this shift from the efficiency side back to the resilience side. And rebalancing is always a hard thing to do. If you have a pendulum and you push it to one side and you leave it, it will never stop in the middle. Yeah, it will always go to the other side first. So this is the problem we are facing right now, that we are coming from an efficient side and we go more to the resilient side. And if you go too far to the resilient side, then you're having a planned economy. You don't have a market economy anymore. So I would call this, when you say just-in-time production, we have to shift to a, let's say, just-in-case production. Just in case something happens. So just in case there is a new American president, just in case there is a war, just in case there is something happening in the world. And resilience is the driver, one of the main driver for diversification, which has been mentioned a few times already. Diversification can be that you broaden your market access and your procurement, so both. And I'm very critical on the EU Commission in many respects, but they are doing a quite good job carrying out these new agreements with several regions and countries in the world, and also with Indonesia, where I'm very glad for. So I mentioned the fourth or the fifth element, Trump. And of course, we still compare T1 and Trump 1 and Trump 2. First question is it comparable? I'm not sure. During Trump 1, we had a very tough but somehow predictable pattern. I remember the soya deal of the European Union, yeah, where we just have to buy all the soya beans to reach a deal. China, by the way, just as a small detail, 2018 made a LNG deal. So China bought LNG gas from the US for the next 10 years, which they didn't need it, but somehow to please Donald Trump, now they sell this LNG to Europe for market prices. So China is earning a lot of money by selling this LNG gas from Trump 1 during Trump 2 to Europe. Well, you cannot blame them for that, but they made a very pretty good deal. The second observation during Trump 1 was neither the EU nor China were able to extend their market share in the US. Both suffered, and I have been living in China during Trump 1, and when you have seen China in 2017, China suffered very hard. They were hit very hard by the tariffs, and it was a shock for China to be so vulnerable for such policies of Trump. Now Trump 2 comes. As I said, I have done some slides, but I guess this has been said already. you can see that, I mean, of course you know that, and has been mentioned a few times, that he is also combining trade policy with other interests of the United States, and that's why he had this secure peace and prosperity agenda, as he named it. And you know all these, you already mentioned that, I don't have to repeat this as well. But what we have seen is, this number 5, that Europe is now in the midst of this US-Chinese trade war, and the issue which tackles us most is the restrictions on the import of rare earth materials and intermediate goods to the EU. I have been to China a few weeks ago, and we had some discussions with also people from the government, and they always say, we don't mean you. You are just collateral damage in this times. But at the end, I mean, of course, they hit us very hard, and we suffer under this politics of China. The Brussels-based think tank Bruegel a few weeks ago made a study that different regions in Europe and also specific industries are hit very differently, obviously. And that leads now to new industrial policy in the European Union. To be honest, this is not inherent to our system, not to all European countries, especially not for Germany. And we got rid of industrial policy many years ago, but we have a revival of this discussion right now. And in my view, when you look now on the meeting last week, the worst case which can happen might be what the diplomat wrote yesterday, that Xi and Trump agree on a G2. And G2 was a concept which was once proposed by both sides, but also dismissed by both sides. And the G2 movement, or a G2, cannot be of any interest of anyone outside of US and China. That's why the EU is working active on new FTAs and strategic agreements, one of it with Indonesia. And there is a lot of room of improvement, as we have seen in the data from the minister, that we have only 15 billion direct investment, while China has 70, Singapore 70. So there is a lot of room of improvement, and I'm very looking forward to that. And we're also talking to other regions in ASEAN, but also to the Gulf region and to India, both partners we are discussing with or negotiating with this since 20 years. And suddenly the pressure, as you mentioned already, is high enough that even in this kind of discussions or negotiations, we might reach a result very soon. I'm in favor of these kind of FTAs, especially also with Indonesia. One remark we might discuss later on is, of course, in most countries in Southeast Asia, as you already also shown in your slide, China is a very dominant player, not only as a, let's say, investor, but also with companies and supply chains. So for me, one important question is, if we diversify to other Southeast Asian countries, how much China do we get? Yeah? Because if you diversify, now we don't talk about Indonesia, but for example about Vietnam, then you will see that the most supply chains for Vietnamese companies are very closely linked to China. So, and then you try to diversify, but at the end, your trade partner might be a new one, but you still depend on the Chinese supply chain. So this might be a point for discussion. And this wouldn't be a diversification, and as your vice minister this morning said, I mean, development focused. This is the most important thing when we carry out these kind of agreements. Yeah, I would like to stop here because the rest you all have seen already a few times this morning. That's why. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tim Weniges. I think that's you also have laid out very comprehensively about, particularly from the ground, basically from the business community in European countries, particularly in Germany, about the dilemma that you have, about between resilience versus efficiency. For 25 years, you've been managed to vote for efficiency, but because of the current challenges, starting from the pandemics and now to Trump, and also, of course, the still ongoing war in Europe, well, resilience has to come to the picture, and that's certainly not easy. And your last point, I think that's something will have to be answered by our Southeast Asian colleagues about how much China will the European get when the European countries seek to diversify the relations and strengthen, the partnership with Southeast Asia. So I think with that, I just would like to open directly to the floor. I think I hope I can see more hands here, because I don't want to entertain myself, because I believe there are a lot of very critical points here. So I see hands there. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's the first round. Okay, I start from the back there. Please, the microphone. Please identify yourself very briefly and just state your question directly.
Thank you. Hello. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Omar Asha Yunus. I'm from the Central European Institute of Asian Studies. I'm a research fellow. So, firstly, I would like to commend the content of the interesting presentation. I agree that the days of the US as a dependable trade partner are pretty much over. Whether or not Trump leaves at the end of his term or he gets a third term, this current dynamic is here to stay. The new Republican president is just going to continue this. A new Democrat president might reverse this, but then the next Republican president will reverse it, and so on. Okay, so that aside, the idea of that mega block is really interesting. However, there are several challenges that must be addressed for it to come through. Firstly, is it still realistic knowing that the many potential members in it have so many different geopolitical and geostrategic interests? Number 2, how should those diverse members prepare for what almost certainly be a negative reaction, whether from Russia or the US? And thirdly, is this still a realistic idea, considering the illness, let's say, with this Liberation Day tariffs? The illness is spreading faster than the potential cure, that is the mega block. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Second question, in the middle, Ibu Gracia, probably.
Thank you, Bulina. Hi, I'm Gracia from the Foreign Ministry. I have two sets of questions. One would be, to what extent does the Trump administration unilateral trade measures accelerate Southeast Asia's economic diversification away from a US-centric value chain? And how might Europe and Indonesia leverage this momentum to promote a more multipolar, rules-based trade ecosystem? And then second, in the wake of the US-China trade frictions and a post-Trump industrial policy shifts, where do you see the most concrete openings for European and Indonesian industries to co-invest, especially in critical sectors such as renewable energy or critical minerals, digital manufacturing, and an EV supply chain? I guess that would be it. Thanks.
Thank you. Third one, Wafa?
Wafa from CSIS. So my question is to Dr. Jain Menon. I'm sure you're paying attention to the latest summit as well, the latest ASEAN summit, and the bilateral deals signed on the sideline. So my question is, one of the trade's legacy of Trump is not just the tariffs, the tariffs, the number there, but also the concessions demanded, right? And I'd like to ask your takeaways on, I think, a report of two things. I think you're paying attention to the Malaysian bilateral deal as well. There are reports that there will be exemptions on certain sectors for Malaysia, especially on commodities that the US cannot produce themselves. But there will be exceptions based on specific commodities. So that's one. That's one. And my question on that one will be: will that deepen the Southeast Asian divide? And because there will be certain countries with spatial arrangements and special treatments, and where their products can take advantages. My second question is that there's a report as well on that deal, where there will be a clause requiring Malaysia to align itself sort of with the US on matters of economic restrictions and sanctions against a third country. So this is just a report, but it has some raised alarm. This was reported in the Straits Times, raised alarms in Malaysia as well, because of, because this has geopolitical elements to it in terms of, imposing economic restrictions to a third country. And Southeast Asia has been quite proud of ourselves being relatively independent in deciding this type of economic restrictions. So I was wondering if, there was discussions from your perspective and as well in this type of new arrangements, new concessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I'll go in reverse order. I think the third question, I think the second is for you, and then the first is for me again. Yeah. So, we heard in Malaysia when we had the summit, the ASEAN summit, these side deals being done, again highlighting the arbitrariness of trade policy by the US, right? Whoever you happen to meet, wherever you go, let's do a deal, let's work something out. If you're not there, we don't visit you, sorry, you've got what you get, and that's it. It's just quite remarkable. But Malaysia did appear to receive quite a few concessions on palm oil, rubber, cocoa, things that the US should never be taxing, by the way. I mean, these are things they don't produce. And to say this is the exception, just because we don't produce it, we won't be, taxing ourselves. That's what they're doing, effectively. But on whether this can then spill over to, cutting into sovereignty issues of how Malaysia is able to operate an independent policy on third parties. I'm Malaysian, but I'm not privy to any internal discussions. I hope this is not true. It might, in my view, be related to the transshipment issue to some extent, trying to curtail transshipment, which could be argued as legitimate, especially illegal transshipment. Countries trying to identify their product as something else when it's not, by moving it through a third country. If they are cooperating on that basis, I think that's fine. But anything more, I think, will raise issues of independence and sovereignty. And I don't think Malaysia or any other country, certainly not in this region, will want to be party to anything like that. That's certainly my hope. I think another issue on this whole, you also asked about whether this might fracture ASEAN, right, with different countries getting deals and so on. I think there is a concern, but ASEAN always, Iman will know this better than me, but even in all these regional deals, they always negotiate country by country, right? There's hardly ever many issues where there's a common position. It's usually done bilaterally. I'm told even in the ASEAN +1 FTAs, ASEAN didn't negotiate as a bloc. Each country negotiated. And then they somehow sort of, wed it all together. Finally, on this general issue, we often talk about the difficulties now for different ASEAN countries being pulled in different directions. I think the US is going to have a hell of a time trying to implement all of these agreements, right? Effectively, what they've got is a very simplified, bare bones FTA with every country in the world. Try implementing, 5 FTAs, efficiently. It's a nightmare in a world of global supply chains where goods, are produced not in one country, but 5, 10, 100 countries, right? Identifying, nationalities of products to apply a different tariff rate because you have a different rate on almost every different country. I mean, it's just impossible. And so we'll have to wait and see what actually happens when it comes to implementation. I think it's going to have to be very different from what Trump and his team think they can do in a world of global supply chains. I think it'll be something quite different. There's a question also about, the difficulties. Of course, I mean, that's why I try to highlight the mega bloc as being less of a pipe dream. Again, I'm not talking about, consolidated trade agreement. I'm talking about increasing cooperation, right, to produce the kinds of outcomes that we get when a multilateral system is functioning well. Or to put it differently, with the multilateral system being compromised, how can we reduce the second best impacts, right? I think we can do that by increasing cooperation between these mega blocks to create a super mega block, if you like. But lots of challenges remain. Diversity, as you say, is a difficult issue. But look at ASEAN, right? ASEAN is arguably the most, or one of the most diverse regions in the world, right? In almost any dimension or metric, right? Economically, political systems, cultural system, religion, language, whatever you name, you'll find so much diversity. And yet, it's the longest surviving grouping amongst developing countries in the world, and it's not just survived; it's thrived, right? And when I first started studying ASEAN 30-odd years ago in Australia, whenever I mentioned ASEAN, people would think I mispronounced Asian, right? No one really knew about ASEAN. Now that will never happen, right? ASEAN is known, it's even admired, around the world. So I think diversity is a challenge, but a challenge that can be overcome over time. And finally, on the illness is spreading much faster than the remedy. Yes, that's true, but we have to work harder on the remedy. I think, like I said, a lot of this Trump tariff policy will end up going unimplementable or unimplemented because it's just too hard to do, right? So I think that's something, but of course, we shouldn't rely on that. We should look at, again, diversifying. Diversifying has costs, short-run costs, that needs to be borne. I think these countries should try and cut the best deals that they can with the US to minimize that costs in the short run. while keeping their eye on longer term patterns of trade that are less concentrated on the US, or indeed on any one or two countries. I think that's where we need to be going forward. One last point, in making these deals, I think, there is an opportunity actually to reduce your barriers, right? If you're looking for a silver lining. This is what I had hoped would happen in, highly protected countries like India, right? There's a lot of room for reform in India, but it fell through because Trump started mixing politics with economics and said, oh, you buy oil from Russia, so you have a 50% tariff, right? Forgetting that the US buys uranium from Russia and fish from Russia and various other things as well. But, let's not a bit of hypocrisy interfere with trade policy. But there is an opportunity for a silver lining to reduce difficult barriers if they involve reducing tariffs that are multilateralized. But if it involves quantitative deals, which is what Trump is keen on, right? You must buy, X tons of sorghum or soya beans at this price. That's not, the way. That's not a positive thing, right? This is quite distortionary. You fix the quantity, you fix the price, and then you say, that's part of our deal. That's not useful. But if it's reducing barriers to one country that can then be multilateralized, then I think there's a positive that we might be able to pull out of this whole mess. Yeah. So let me stop there.
Okay, please start at it.
Well, I think it's always a good advice to look what people or countries do and not what they say. And it's especially true in the US, I would say. I mean, if you mentioned all these agreements, it's impossible to carry them out. And at the end, in some cases, they don't even care. I have been to Ukraine a few weeks ago, and we also talked about the Ukraine raw materials deal with the US. If you carry out this deal, Ukraine would need 720 years to fulfill this deal with the United States. Just an example from another region, how they impose these deals and how much is made for the public, how much is made for the constituency, and how much is really made for let's say, hard politics and economic interest. That's the first thing. The second, the lady asked for the how can you hinder consequences from Russia or China? At the end there's only one answer, and this is diversification and integration. And ASEAN has developed tremendously over the last years in integrating these very different, as you mentioned, countries. And also the European Union is working on that. Germany or Spain or Italy would never have the leverage to stand up against China or the US. Integration is the key, but integration is very hard work, because you have, of course, 27 member countries with different interests and different problems bringing on the table in this kind of integration, but there is no alternative to this level of integration if you want to have a leverage against others. And the third point I would make is that in many of these cases we observe, beside the fact that they are not very rational, as you mentioned, the products the US are not even capable of producing, you should also take in mind that because of very complicated value-adding processes and very complicated supply chains, there are many consequences which cannot be intended in advance. I give you one example. For example, Mercedes-Benz, which is a Stuttgart company, they produce cars in South Africa for the US market. So they are hit by 30% now. I mean, they produce 100% of the production goes to the US. And I'm sure he wants to hit Mercedes, but I'm sure the US administration is not aware that they try to somehow blame South Africa for something, but they hit another company and other countries in the world. And this is, you should at least have it in mind, I guess, that there are so many collateral damages you cannot predict in advance when it comes to this kind of tariff policy like the US administration is carrying out right now. And I guess there has been a learning process as well. During Trump 1, many in Brussels and in Europe thought, well, this was just an accident and there will be another president soon, a new administration. And latest since January this year, we know that this has not been an accident, but a shift in the policy. But I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I at least try to focus on this integration issue, which is key in my opinion.
Thank you. Now I go for the second round. I see one hand there. Two more if there's any, or one more. I think we don't have enough time to entertain two more. One more? No one wants to take up the opportunity? Okay, if not, then I go with Susa first. Okay, please.
Thank you. Zsuzsa Ferenci from the Martin Center in Brussels. Thanks for the very clear presentations. I have a question to Tim. I appreciate your laying out the trade-off between efficiency and resilience, but I want to throw in a third concept, which is competitiveness, and ask you to kind of relate that to the trade-off. I mean, in Europe's case, clearly we did a trade-off for efficiency in the past decades. Perhaps at the time we didn't call it a trade-off because resilience perhaps was not such of such importance as it is today, as it has become today, and perhaps we call it an arrangement, which was partially based on trust, at least with the US. So those were different times. But could you, connect competitiveness to going forward? Because you did say that in your view, I think you said that the EU is doing perhaps well in rebalancing towards resilience. But again, where do you put competitiveness, or is this also, does this mean that the EU is perhaps, in your view, because there's many different views on that, and there's a lot of criticism that the EU is actually not doing that great or as it should be. So could you comment on that? Thanks.
Okay, Dr. Tim, if I may just also ask you one more question as well, because you're from the association from the business industry in Germany. Maybe you can share with us also the real challenges on the ground. If the European wants to deepen the relations with Southeast Asian countries, this will be the well, not new partners, but the critical partners in the future, the strategic partners. What are the real challenges, the real barriers that you found that you may share with us, to be discussed, please?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I mean, competitiveness hasn't been mentioned in this discussion yet, which is might be an internal view of the German or European side. My impression is that in the past we defined competitiveness with efficiency. Yeah, I don't want to overstretch this picture, but it's now we know that resilience is also part of this competitiveness. You cannot be competitive if you are not resilient against external shocks, and at the same time you have an efficient economy build up. But what I'm also missing, and this might be a critic on the European Commission right now, is that we had this as a main goal of the competitiveness in the Lisbon strategy of 2001, and you don't hear this over the last years anymore. So it was replaced by Green Deal. Now we have the new Industrial Green Deal. I mean, you have always a new name, and every 5 years for more or less the same concept. So that competitiveness is the core of these of the meaning also of the European Union within these different FTAs and strategic developments. I think this has to be much more focused on from the Brussels side. I mean, without competitiveness, you won't be able to be a stable partner to others. And I mean, of course, also if Indonesia talks to us, I mean, of course, they are also asking, are you competitive enough to make an extra value for us if we come into negotiations? And I totally agree with you that this has to be more on the core, more on the focus. But as I said, maybe resilience is more important than in the past. And it costs money. And this costs money, and we have to make sure that the industry and the business sector is capable of paying this extra price. And you can also only pay this extra price for resilience if you are efficient. Yeah, now I stopped this efficient, resilient game, but I think for me, it describes the situation quite well. So the second question was on the real challenges. Yeah. The real challenge is very simple. There is one country in the world with an enormous industrial capacity. This is China. And there is no second China so far. And even if you take all ASEAN countries together, it's not a second China. So we are profiting from low prices and even shrinking prices in spare parts from China over the last 20 years. You know that we had in Europe a quite generous fiscal policy, and at the same time we did not face inflation because of low prices from imports from China. So this is the biggest challenge, I would say. Of course, you can diversify to other countries, but the industrial capacity lies within China. And this is also a huge, maybe the biggest problem for the US. I mean, if you have a look on Apple, for example, they produce, I think now 35% of the Apple iPhones are now produced in India, with all the problems you are facing when you are in India. So the capacity is in China. And of course, you have it in rare materials. The interesting thing is when you come to rare earth, for example, as far as I know, I mean, there might be better experts in the room, you can find rare earth more or less everywhere in the world. But only China has the industrial capacity to bring it on the market. So, and you have the same problem with electronics, with steel. Just an example, I mean, Germany produces, I think, something like 30 million tons of steel every year. China is producing 1 billion ton. So there is this huge capacity, and of course, China is also facing problems with that. I mean, they have seen this during Trump 1. They got the tariff policy, and they immediately tried to push all the exports to the European Union. And during Trump 1, we had, well, at least less barriers to protect our own market. And now we see the same again. And these are I would say, the very practical issues when it comes to the business sector.
Very good response. Is there any other hand? Last chance? Okay. If not, maybe I just give Dr. Joyan one last question before I go for the final. Or you want to make this as a final comment as well? Be my guest. About ASEAN then. I mean, we were talking here about Southeast Asia, but ASEAN, does ASEAN have the capacity to work together? Or as just follow up from Wafa, or Southeast Asia will deal with the situation rather individually? So there's a big divide within ASEAN.
Okay. Wow. This is a difficult question to end just before lunch. But of course, as of very recently, ASEAN has just grown, right, by one member with Timor-Leste, which has added to its diversity. I remember I was involved working on when Cambodia and Laos were joining, and it was a very exciting time in those countries, and we expect the same again now. But of course, with greater diversity and new members, it will take time to get up to speed. It can take 10 years. We saw that, again, going back to the experience with Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. So ASEAN will have to be patient and work together to deal with that challenge. I think, people often complain about, ASEAN's lack of teeth and not coming out with enough concrete and, anything more than very general pronouncements or statements. But that's what they have to do to keep this diverse grouping together, right? Or it would really fracture very quickly. And I think they've managed that extremely well. If you look in the developing world, it's littered with this alphabet soup of groupings that do nothing, really, right? But ASEAN has achieved so much. It has a place on the world stage. It brings together leaders from all around the world, regularly. It has, in terms of this particular Trump turmoil, there was talk initially of ASEAN putting together a common position in response to his Liberation Day tariffs. That was never going to happen, right? I think, anyone who knows ASEAN knew that that was not going to happen. Even though we know from game theory that the best outcome for all members is to have a collusive option of agreeing a common position. But as I said earlier, even when it comes to negotiating with the +1 agreements, each country wants to do it independently. But what ASEAN did do was they didn't retaliate, right? None of them retaliated. And this is a good thing, I think. Of course, very few countries did retaliate. China did. Europeans threatened to. Canada threatened to, because they have the heft, right? ASEAN doesn't. But also because I think ASEAN recognizes that their tremendous economic successes have come from liberalization and globalization, right? So doing anything different would run counter to that lived experience, right? And they are the living example of how regionalism can promote globalization, and that liberalization can improve living standards of the poor, the middle class. And if that is true, reversing that, raising tariffs, will also reverse those successes. So I think that's how ASEAN will succeed more than just Southeast Asia as a grouping of individual countries. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jan. Tim, you want to add the last few words, the final comments, if there's any? No? Okay. All right. I think we come to the end of the session, this panel 2. Well, we have learned, I think, from the session that with more uncertainty to come due to Trump's erratic tariff policy that makes politics, security, and economic, I think we are all agreed that we are shaken from our comfort zone. But I think that also creates opportunities for countries, regions to work together. And in this case, it's European Union and Southeast Asia, not to work individually to deal with the current impact from these tariff policies and to mitigate the future risks, because the impact, as mentioned earlier, will stay for many, many years. And there's an urgency to continue deepening and strengthening the multilateral and regional arrangement, which is against the current tide and temptation to be inward-looking and implement the me-first policy, And I think Dr. Menon also mentioned about the idea of the mega block or even super mega block, which hopefully something we can see in the future. And finally, from Dr. Tim, that creating resilience certainly is not easy as saying it, but I think with the long-term commitment from the respective governments, I think that's something that's very doable and very much needed in the current turbulence that we are facing. With that note, I would like to close the panel too, and please join me to give a round of big applause to the two excellent speakers that we are having. So now I return to the MC for the announcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panel session 2. Thank you for Dr. Lina Alexandra for moderating, and also Dr. Jayant Menon and Mr. Tim Venegas for your excellent session. We would like to invite you to please come off the stage so that we can move on to the next session, that is lunch. All right, once again, a big round of applause for session 2. And as you may have heard, our next session will be lunch, and lunchtime will be in the front of this auditorium towards the back in the pre-function room. And we expect you to be back in the auditorium by 1:45 p.m. so that we can start the panel number 3 later on in the afternoon. So thank you, and that is all for